Hello everyone, welcome to the floor of the 2013 Magic the Gathering World Championships. Rich Hagan, Zach Hill with you in the booth. There you see the feature match area. We are getting ready for the match between Reid Duke and Craig Wescoe, and there you see them on the floor and they are getting ready to go. So let's cut to the action. There you see Craig Wescoe, your Pro Tour Dragon's Maze champion, the most recent Pro Tour champion, king of the white weenie decks. He goes aggro whenever he gets the chance with the planes, and up against him is none other than Reid Duke, one of the co-leaders overnight at 5-1. There you see Reid on the path to redemption. The players are up and running. It is a plains from Craig Wescoe. It is a forest from Reid Duke. Swamp for Wesco, and we are in business. Away we go, Zach Hill.
Well, I mean, shocked to see the first play from Wesco being a black creature rather than a white creature, but not to disappoint, it looks like he has a Master of Diversions in his hand, so getting back to the tried and true Wesco formula right now.
Yeah, so whenever that attacks, he gets to tap something down. So Reid, initially on the defensive, he's going to make an Advocate of the Beast. He has a couple of those in his deck. He is green-red, he's got Volcanic Geyser in there, a couple of big end things. He's got a Spore Mound at 4 in his hand. You see the Woodborn Behemoth, 4/4 that becomes 8/8 if he ever gets there. But Craig Wescoe will be trying to make sure Reid Duke never gets to 8 mana. You see Charging Griffin come down there. It's the 2/2 fly that becomes 3/3 when it attacks.
Yeah, incredible curve from Wesco right now. 2, 3, 4. He's got a Dark Favor in his hand to push through some more damage, as well as a Nightwing Shade.
Now that's actually a nice play from Reid at that point, because although Deadly Recluse is very small, it does have that key ability of Death Touch, and that potentially changes what Craig will do, because that Dark Favor is now going to look less favorable.
Yeah, exactly. I mean, one would have to expect that the Deadly Recluse gets tapped, but Reid also slow rolling a Thunder Strike right here. So anything that Craig thinks he can put together to trade with that Advocate of the Beast is probably not going to work too well for Craig.
Yeah, Thunder Strike, the key bit of that is the first strike, which means that that Deadly Recluse is going to do its Death Touch thing.
It's you know, what Craig would like to do is be able to tap Deadly Recluse and just attack with his flyer. But of course, Master of Diversions has to attack first in order to do that. So.
Yeah, so instead we see one of the classic, all-time classic Magic cards. It is your 4/4 Flying Vigilant Serra Angel for Wesco.
It is not a bad rip from Wesco's side of the board, and with 2 flyers now, he can afford to take a little bit of time to find an answer to that Recluse.
Just Dark Favor and Nightwing Shade in hand, as you can see, and Duke will sit out with the Mana West Sliver, which might turn out to be useful in terms of mana, but it's pretty late. It's obviously ideally a turn 2 play.
Right. I mean, it does allow him to sit and keep Thunderstrike mana open, setting up Volcanic Geyser next turn, maybe Pitchburn Devils, maybe Spore Mound, and allows him to cast his second Advocate of the Beast with Thunderstrike mana if that's what he chooses to do.
We're going to see the Dark Favor from Wesco. It goes on to the Charging Griffin. So that's a significant upgrade to the White Flyer.
Yep.
And Reid says, sure, you can come in. And as we know, Reid flicking his cards there, he has things going on in his hand, largely thanks to that mountain.
So Wesco right now saying, okay, look, I'm fine with my Master of Diversions getting eaten. I'm going to hit you for a lot of damage right now.
He's actually even turned his Serra Angel sideways, which he does not need to do because it is Vigilant.
That is not what that card does.
No.
And
it's
Wesco,
better than that.
Yeah, right, exactly. Wesco actually has a decent long-term play there because he can Corpse Hauler back the Master of Diversions, play that, and if Reid can't muster another way to block a flyer, Wesco just attacks for lethal once Reid falls down to 4 now from this attack.
So that Master of Diversions has indeed hit the graveyard. And now Craig will run out Bloodbane, sacrifice any creature, it gets +2/+2. And that +2/+2 in this format, Zach, is an awful lot.
Right. Yeah, I mean, it allows you to throw away any cards, especially in a board stall like this, of creatures that have already been blocked. Just the ability to translate them to damage, obviously really powerful. So we see Duke with just enough to kill the Griffin if Wesco attacks right now, so I would expect him to try and set up set up Master of Diversions again.
But Reid is in a lot of trouble here, you would think. Way down on life, lots of threats on the other side of the board. He does, of course, have a ton of cards in hand. You see it there on the right of your screen. all those great options, but it's whether he ever gets to be alive to cast them. You see Sentinel Sliver and Nightwind Shade, the Wesco hand right now, and he's going to spend 5 mana to run out the 2/2 fly that pumps for 1 and a black.
Now, Wesco again saying, okay, like Reid just has a grip full of cards, and yet passed with 5 mana open, you have to be expecting a Chandra's Outrage or a Volcanic Geyser here. That's, of course, exactly what Reid has. So Wesco electing not to attack so as to not walk into that removal spell.
Okay, so there goes the classic 2-for-1. As Wesco takes a look at his Charging Griffin and Dark Favor, both of which are now in his graveyard, alongside that Master of Diversions.
Right.
So back we go to Reid, who draws a forest. And is land good for Reid roundabout now? The fact that he's been sitting on 5 mana for a while and that he'd like to be able to have some options?
In some sort of theoretical sense, a land is good there, and that it would allow him to unload his hand. The bigger problem he's facing, unfortunately, though, is that he's got 4 power, 2 different 4-power attackers in the air at 4 life. So without the ability to muster a flying blocker right now, all the cards in his hand just don't seem to matter very much. He's got a Pitchburn Devils, but unfortunately he doesn't have a way to sacrifice it. So there's no way for it to be able to deal that 3 damage to the Nightwing Shade, which is what he wants to kill right now.
So this looks suspiciously like a, you know, one of those attacks that just to make your opponent think about things a little bit, and in it comes.
Right.
Reid lays his forest. There's a Root Waller, passes the turn.
Craig confirming 4 cards, sensing that the writing's on the wall right here. Now
Indeed.
The question is, of course, you know, he's just got to make sure whether he wants to go for it or whether he thinks that Reid has some sort of removal spell.
Yeah, and the fact he's drawn Celestial Flare as well guarantees that he's just so far ahead here.
Yeah.
And Reid, as we know, is sitting there with all kinds of cards, but none of them the cards that you want to be in hand right now. You see his career on the right of your screen, Reid Duke, 23, over $65,000 in winnings already, at a huge Grand Prix win percentage. But here we go, in block there, Deadly Recluse blocks the Serra Angel, Nightwing Shade, and Reid playing this all out properly, because right now the Nightwing Shade is not lethal, it only has the capacity to be lethal.
Right, and you've got to make sure to sequence this. You know, if Craig just sort of tapped all his lands and said, okay, pump it twice, Reid could technically respond with a shock and say, well, you got a little bit too excited.
I don't think they let you do that anymore.
You can't do that anymore?
I don't think they let you do that to people, Zach Hill. I'm really sorry about that.
That's a dagger.
No, they work out that you kind of meant what you meant.
Wait, so...
Celestial Flare, sacrifice blocking creature.
And it looks like Craig not electing to kill Reid here. He edicted away the Spider, but does not pump the Shade. Now, he could have theoretically pumped the Shade twice and straight up killed Reid. Instead, he gets rid of the Deadly Recluse and gives Reid another turn.
And apart from anything else, Reid also gets the information about the Celestial Flare.
Right.
Although, that said, they've looked at each other's deck list, so they're aware of that.
They're theoretically aware of that. Sometimes it's nice to have
It's a useful reminder.
Yeah, exactly. So Craig just playing super conservatively there, knows that he's still got 2 flyers on the board, that Reid's been mustering removal, able to sort of buy back his 3rd flyer. So just playing about as conservatively as he possibly can from a commanding board state.
So there you go. Reid Duke bites the dust, but still 2 to go, potentially. A very, very fast start from Craig Wescoe, and then flyers to the air. Really sort of classic core set you expect. Come out of the gates early, get your guys into the air, and then start turning them sideways. Or in the case of Serra Angel, turning them straight forward. So there you go. 1-0 to Craig Wescoe. Friday Night Magic. You can play Magic at a store near you every Friday. Earn Planeswalker points and battle against your friends in Friday Night Magic. August's FNM promo card is Dimir Charm. Visit wizards.com/FNM to find a store near you. Dimir Charm. What is this? Dimir.
Yeah, I don't think that's a guild. I've never heard of it.
Okay. Well, there's a card that's a charm, and you can get it at Friday Night Magic. So there you see Reid Duke. He is one of your co-leaders at 5-1. And remember, because of the way the pod system works, you are not playing people necessarily on quite the same record. Craig Wescoe is one of the players at 4-2. And there you see Craig Wescoe's stats on the right of your screen. Nakattle's for life because he's a huge fan of the wild Nakatle. Lots of people are. 30 years old, and he's been playing for absolute ever right since back in the late 90s. 170 career pro points. You see his 3 Pro Tour top 8s. And not only are they all from the same country, they are all from the same state within that country. He is a big fan of California, San Diego 2010, San Francisco Worlds 2011, and then, of course, Pro Tour Dragon's Maze, which he won the whole shebang last time around. So I think he may well settle in San Diego at some point in the future and then just never lose again.
Are Savannah lions legal to be kept as pets in San Diego?
Oh, well, I mean, if not, I mean, they've probably got some at the San Diego Zoo, so... 3 Grand Prix top 8s for Wesco. You see a 61% win percentage. This is the first show where we've actually shown you these win percentages. You see pretty much higher in Grand Prix than Pro Tour. That is mostly true for pretty much every pro, because generally the standard is just that little bit lower. You get to just use all your experience. You've got newer players coming to Grand Prix. That's relatively not true for Pro Tours. So that sort of 61.56 is a pretty good guide. If you can ever get your Pro Tour win percent to about 60%, that is a very good equivalent, almost to a kind of batting 300 in baseball. It makes you like a premier hitter. So round about 60 is the mark there. Grand Prix, maybe round about 65. The absolute best of the best sort of peak around 67, 68 at Grand Prix.
And the thing that's challenging to look at when you see lifetime statistics, I mean, like we talked about with Craig, he started playing Pro Tours like 13, 14, 15 years old. And these lifetime stats, account for that, so a lot of these Pro Tours are from back in the day, and so Craig, has really demonstrated steady improvement over his long career, and as we see with his 3 top 8s just in the last several years.
So, gearing up for Game 2 in Reid against Wesco. These are 2 of the players who could theoretically end up in a 7-way tie for the lead at the end of the M14 draft.
And that's something that we've seen last year in the same tournament, where you just get a lot more clustering. Not only do you only have 16 players, you just have 16 players of pretty comparable skill levels. So it's really hard for someone, except in the case of Yasuoka last year, to really run away with the field. So I would expect to start seeing people start to regress a little bit more toward the mean.
Absolutely. You mean it's going to be close at the end of the draft?
I think it's going to be.
I think that's what you said there. Okay, I'm going to write that down.
Regress
towards the mean. I like that.
It's when you're not nice anymore.
Okay. Oh, I do that regularly then.
Oh, okay. You're naughty, you're telling us?
I frequently regress towards the mean. All right, so Craig Wescoe against Reid Duke. Game number 2 coming right up. Let's see whether they keep their opening hands. And I guess that you hear Reid Duke say keep. I guess, Zach, that he is going to have to be very careful here, because he had lost game 1, really, by the time he'd laid 3 land and an Advocate of the Beast, because Craig had come out so quickly, and he has to be aware of that possibility here in Game 2, which is underway. Forest against Swamp this time. Reid will lay a mountain and pass the turn. Craig's second land, you would think, would be that Plains on the right. It is, and out comes the first sliver of this match. Reid had the chance to pick up quite a lot of slivers, and in the end decided that he wasn't going to play too many of them and just didn't go down that path. There you see Reid's hand. There's a Chandra's Outrage in there, Volcanic Geyser and Ogre Battle Driver and Root Waller, along with his couple of forests. So he's fine for mana. And Craig is going to send in, this time it is Vigilant, that's correct, the 2-2. And Reid, of course, knowing that Root Waller can become a 4-4, has no interest in there, especially as he's tapped out. Bloodbairn next for Craig Wescoe. Again, sacrifice a creature, it gets +2/+2. Reid draws a forest, has the Battle Driver, Chandra's Outrage, the Volcanic Geyser, a nice giant growth, lovely trick. It's been great since the dawn of Magic. Still remains very, very good. The Root Waller goes in, and Craig says, yeah, I'm not doing anything there. I'm not inviting you to spend mana. And now here comes a very, very powerful card in Ogre Battle Driver. 2 red, red.
A very powerful magic card, a little awkward with Reid's hand right now. He has 3 non-creature spells, so not able to capitalize on it as much as he may like. Craig there has a 2-drop, 3-drop, 4-drop, does not have a 4th land though, but given the presence of Ring Flesh in his hand, Pay No Heed, and Celestial Flare, I think he's going to swing right in.
Yeah, I'm really interested in that Pay No Heed. That's a real Wesco special kind of card. Prevent all damage a source of your choice would deal this turn. Baby Fog.
Yeah, exactly. And your creatures still get to deal damage. So a nice little efficient combat trick, assuming you have creatures of comparable size.
And also, the fact it says source rather than creature means it can be things like, for example, a Planeswalker.
Right,
that
or
was
a
going to
Volcanic Geyser to the dome.
For example. And who wouldn't like a card with flavor text from King Henry IV, Part 1?
British people.
Was Shakespeare British?
I know, that's weird.
Wow, that's awesome. I didn't know we had famous people
y'all
like
have
that.
so much in common, the two of you guys.
That's true. We both have vowels and consonants in our names. All right, back to the action. Wesco, Child of Night, Charging Griffin, Serra Angel, the 2 No Heed and Ring Flesh and Flare. Plenty of trickery going on there as he puts the 2/1 Child of Night, which is a fascinating card in M14 because it's been good in past core sets. And arguably, with an overall decrease in power level, Child of Night has actually gone down in value in M14. It's far less good than it's been in its sort of most recent printings.
Yeah, I think it's a little bit easier to gum up the ground in this environment. Now, there are some more ways to give it evasion, which is sort of what you want to be doing. But also the presence of cards like Ring Flesh, like specifically, makes it, it just dies a lot more in this format, I've found.
There you see the board state. Ogre, Battle Driver, and Rootwaller on the left for Reid Duke. Sliver, Bloodband, Child of Night for Wesco on the right. Wesco 1 up here and chasing Reid Duke because Wesco is 4-2 coming into today. Duke, one of the 3 co-leaders, alongside Shahar Shenhar and Brian Kibler at 5-1.
So you see Rootwalla getting in for the full amount. Deadly Recluse, which you don't normally observe being guessed post-combat with an Ogre Battle Driver in play. Still coming down to play D. Again, Reid not really able to capitalize on that Battle Driver, but Rootwalla dealing tons of damage. And Wesco needs a 4th land now to get that Griffin out of his hand. His Ring Flesh is doing a reasonable job of allowing him to attack through that Ogre Battle Driver, but it's going to be a lot harder to get through both Recluse and Battle Driver while still managing to advance his board against the Rootwalla that's taking huge chunks out of his life total.
So you see the 2 players, Star City Games for Reid, TCG player, the top of choice for Wesco. And Wesco will come in with the Bloodband, which right now can be a 6/6 unaided if Wesco is prepared to sacrifice off his 2 other creatures. So that's pretty hefty.
Yeah, and it's a good solid attack here because it makes it slightly less obvious that a trick is going on. If he attacks with all of his guys, it's like, okay, well, I've got, I can Ring Flesh more likely. It's also true here that he's got to play around Giant Growth now, which he didn't have to play around last turn.
And there, Giant Growth, says Reid. Craig with 6 cards in hand. He is going to see his Bloodband bite the dust, and he's going to spend his 4 mana, send out the fly once again that did him so proud in the last game. He put Dark Favor on the Charging Griffin in the last game. I have one result for you coming in from the back tables. I can tell you that Yuya Watanabe has defeated Stanislav Sivka by 2-0. And that means Watanabe, the defending champion, remember, has gone to 4 wins, 4 and 3. Sivka now 3 and 4.
So one of the things we talked about when we saw the Battle Driver get drafted was how much value it would add to Elvish Mystic, and it's exactly for situations like this. Normally Mystic, not a great top deck in the late game, but to come down as a 3/1 haste, along with Battle Driver, along with Rootwalla, and we see Wesco tapped out with a handful of combat tricks, cannot really do too much about this assault that's coming through right now on Reid's side.
Also, we have another result coming in. Li Shichan of Hong Kong has defeated Shuhei Nakamura by 2-0. And what that means, that's pretty much Shuhei done because they were at 2 and 4. So, yep, by my reckoning, that is Shuhei Nakamura gone at 2 and 5, 7 and 5. I don't think we'll make it into the top 4. And Li Shichan stays alive in what was essentially an elimination match. He goes up to 3 and 4.
So Wesco still taking over blocks here. Finally decides to trade Child of Night with Mystic.
You're at 11.
Gain a little bit of life, and Reid now opting to keep open Chandra's Outrage mana and Geyser mana rather than get through for a couple more damage with the Root Wall.
Yeah, Reid's in pretty decent shape here, right?
I would say so. I mean, Wesco looked like he had a lot more momentum coming out, but missing his land drops wasn't prevented him from leveraging his combat tricks and getting through in the air with the Griffin. Now he's lost several of his little creatures. He was probably not too sad to trade that Blood Baron for a Giant Growth, but the problem is that without a 5th land, he's not going to be able to drop Sarah Angel, which could help him stabilize, or cast Celestial Flare, which would allow him to deal with some of these big creatures from Reid's side.
Yeah, that shot you just saw there was actually incredibly poetic, because essentially the 2 5-drops were just slightly out of focus, and you were looking at, therefore, a very mediocre hand of, you know, sort of little reaction, retreat, little reaction, retreat, little reaction, retreat. And basically those 2 on the side, they might as well not have been there. So Craig down to 11, and he's going in, and as we know, he does have plenty of things to go at with Pay No Heed and Ring Flesh and Celestial Flare. But Reid is happy to put the Deadly Recluse in the way.
And I think what's going on here is, like, Reid's just trying to bait a 2-for-1. He's got an instant up, so, I mean, if Wesco rings Flesh, the Deadly Recluse, then Reid kills the Sliver in response. He could theoretically get a 2-for-1. Now, in practice, Wesco has a Pay No Heed, which would also stop the burn spell. So Reid here has to figure out, like, how much does he care about this specific Sliver? How much does he care about his Deadly Recluse?
Not enough to keep it alive, apparently. He says, yeah, that's fine. We'll let that go. He continues to have those 2 cards in hand, Chandra's Outrage and Volcanic Geyser.
And that was, in general, a really great trade for Craig. I mean, like, his 2-2, he doesn't care about that much. It's outclassed by most of the board. Whereas Deadly Recluse can trade with essentially anything. What I think Reid's trying to do here is just make Craig sit on that 1 untapped plains. He knows that Pay No Heed's a thing. Or, well, he's...
So he's going for the Volcanic Geyser.
Again, saying he cares more about the Griffin than he does about a Sliver.
So there's, say, I don't think so. Out of this nettle danger, blah, blah, blah.
Right. And now Reid can make sure his Chandra's Outrage resolves. Again, you know, he could have outraged the Griffin, too, to deal some damage. But he's saying, no, I'd rather have access to 4 damage if I need it.
Yeah, the other thing for Reid is that, as you said, because he's got the Chandra's Outrage, he knows that Sarah Angel dies to Chandra's Outrage. He knows that it's going to be very difficult for Craig to get into a game state where he can pump a Nightwing Shade enough. And now here we go, Chandra's Outrage, your Griffin.
Right.
That works. Wesco goes to 9.
So 5.
Then piling in. Wesco deep in trouble now, and you would think we are heading for a game 3 really rather soon.
Yeah, again, Wesco doesn't get the second wide available to use his Edict. He's got Nightwing Shade that's not going to really help him stabilize. I mean, honestly, just great setup from Reid earlier, just walking right into the combat trek.
And now Smash his Young Pyromancer, which it doesn't matter that it's a Young Pyromancer, it just matters that it turns sideways straight away. And we are tied at 1 apiece here in round 7 of the World Championship. Show off your magic colors by purchasing new Planeswalker apparel at mtgmerch.com. Yeah, I think it's pretty much, I don't know about you, Zab, but well, you're a Rakdos guy once upon a time, so I guess for me, it wouldn't matter if it was Jace the office cleaner. I would still be wanting the Jace shirt. Yeah, that's clearly the one for me.
I dig that. I might have to Chandra or Liliana.
Or maybe both and wear them sort of half and half, which would get you as close as you philosophically are on the color wheel.
That is true.
Yeah.
It would be very Rakdos. I can make myself a quilt out of both of them.
Quilt. First time you've ever heard that on a live Pro Tour webcast, I guarantee.
Man, I have many recreational hobbies.
Good to know. Reid Duke, 23, 111 lifetime pro points, and of course, a huge career on Magic Online, which is where he came to prominence. He won the Magic Online Championship Series, played on the biggest stage of all, absolutely the poster boy for the Magic Online community, tremendous player. We've been talking to Reid over the weekend. We saw his draft yesterday. We were chatting with him. Obviously, one of the co-leaders coming in overnight. You see his win percent at the Pro Tour, 56. That matches Wesco's pretty much bang on. The Grand Prix win percent, though, that 67% win rate is huge. That is absolute world elite class, well and truly.
I mean, just even the objective numbers are kind of crazy. Like 263 wins. That is a lot of matches played and won at a Grand Prix with 7 top 8s. So totally incredible. And then, you know, that doesn't even take into account any of the Magic Online matches, which is how Reid kind of got famous in the first place.
I can tell you that Dmitry Budakov has a win. He came in at 2-4 overnight. He is now at 3-4, which means he is still technically alive, but that is at the expense of the now 0-7 Martin User. He is your Wall of Frost right now.
He's my Wall of Frost. I would love to have a Wall of Frost. No, I ran into Yuza last night, and he was taking it in stride, and he wasn't nearly as upset as I think I would be if I was in his position. But a series of unfortunate events, and coupled with not the tightest play, has not made it a great weekend for Martin.
Tell you someone who's having a fantastic weekend, and someone who is just gearing up for an even more fantastic weekend to the weekend, because we're here all week, it turns out. Shahar Shenhar, the Israeli national champion, he will lead a team that is terrific, includes Eviet Olpana, Niv Shmuli, and Niv Danieli, all three of whom are very solid. I think Israel have a great chance this weekend. Shahar Shenhar in the individual world championship, he is now 6-1 at the expense in round 1 today of Brian Kibler. Kibler falls, if you like, slightly back into the pack at 5-2, but Shahar has at least a share of the lead now at 6-1, depending on what happens to Reid Duke. If Duke loses this next game, Shahar Shenhar will be your outright leader.
And that means this is a big match for Duke. I mean, Craig obviously wanting to propel himself into the top, but I mean, it behooves Reid to remain on top of the standings again for tie breaks and just to preserve momentum going to standard. I mean, I really, going into modern. I think it's going to be very challenging for any of these players to maintain a huge advantage going to constructed. They're all playing very similar decks and they're very similar play skill. Reid in particular happens to have a little bit of an innovation to bring to modern. But I feel like the pack is going to kind of cluster around that constructed format, which means you want to get your edge right after you've drafted a great deck.
Okay, now this is a big moment because as we saw in game 1 that Craig Wescoe won. Yes, you see, now they're both mulliganed. And the thing is, there's a sort of interesting dance there. Now, it was actually pretty straightforward. We took a quick glance at Wesco's hand, and it was pretty clear-cut. Wesco knows that he wants to come out of the gates very quickly. That's how he won game 1. Once things were kind of stabilized and sort of mid-gamey in game 2, Reid pretty much had the answers. Although Wesco was struggling with land to an extent, didn't have the second planes and so on. Reid, on the other hand, is sitting there, remembering that blistering start from game 1, and knowing that, in a sense, that draw is something he's going to straight up lose to, so he has to try and find early defense. So that, I'm mulliganing, me too. There's an element of, well, thank goodness you didn't have the 7 that was going to come blistering out of the gate, but I need to go away and mulligan as well, because I didn't have a defense against that blistering start, so let's all do it again with 6.
And that's one of the tricky parts of the art of mulliganing, is that you can't just look and see, like, oh, how good is my hand? You have to expect, like, what is my opponent's hand that is likely to beat me? And if they have that draw, can I compete against that? And oftentimes you've got, like, a reasonable start, but you just can't beat, 1-drop, 2-drop in constructed, or 2-drop, 3-drop trick. And you've got to react to that.
Okay, so let's see what they've got. Wesco looks to me like he has a couple of planes in his hand. He's got a Serra Angel there, a Dark Favor, which obviously he can't cast because that is not the right color for him. And that looks like it might be a Dawn Strike Paladin, a Pay No Heed, maybe?
Pay No Heed on the end, yeah.
That does not seem awesome. Reid Duke, meanwhile, he's got Academy Raider, Witch Stalker is there. Yeah, and Craig has to go away, and now at 5 on the play. Now, being on the play is still good, but it does mean, of course, 1 less card. So he's essentially 2 cards down to Reid Duke in this one, because he will begin with 5. Reid has kept his 6. There's a Lightning Talons in hand, Academy Raider, as we say, and Witch Stalker. There you see the 3/3 Hexproof Wolf. And any blue or black spells, that's not going to be desperately relevant, one would think, although Craig Wescoe will have to just keep an eye on that for his black spells and just whether he might actually need to cast Instance as removal on his own turn if there's a Witch Stalker out to have to factor in.
I mean, what that really does put a damper on is specifically the card Ring Flesh, which you kind of want to use as a combat trick. You're not always going to be able to get 1 toughness creatures with that. And so, I mean, it's an interaction that's pretty unlikely to come up, but could happen. I mean, you're already excited if you're Reid to have a Trained Armadon in your deck, a 3/3 for 3.
Absolutely.
So 2 significant bonuses. You're not going to argue with that.
Yeah. It can't be turned into a 0/2 with the Ring Flesh. Oh, and by the way, if you try the Ring Flesh, well, then it's a 4/4. So we go, and let's see if Craig Wescoe can make a decent start. Remember, he mulliganed to 5, Reid Duke at 6. It's Plains versus Forest. We're going to see Swamp, so at least Craig does have both forms of mana, and he's got some more in hand. It looks like he's got Serra Angel there. He has led off with a Carpathian Knight, which for 2 mana gets +1/+0, so pretty clunky in terms of pumping, but can make just 1 point of difference at a time. Will potentially make a difference as the back end of the game as we see Bloodbane come down for Craig.
Yeah, really not a bad start for Craig on 5 cards. You have 2-drop, 3-drop, and then one of the best cards in your deck in Serra Angel. You got to take off a turn to cast it, and Reid not really full of any action. He's going to have his Witch Stalker down, but that Witch Stalker is going to have to do a lot of work because he currently can't cast either the Academy Raider or the Lightning Talons that are in his hands.
And also the fact that Wesco has this turn where he doesn't necessarily want to do anything much. If he lays his 4th land, when he's now drawn land number 5, which means we will see Serra Angel on time on turn 5. Wesco can lay a land here, attack with the Carpathian Knight, and that will be 2/1 first strike, 3/1 first strike, and without really having taken any disadvantage off, because that 4 mana is doing nothing this turn. Of course, Reid doesn't know that, but we do.
Yeah, really a pretty substantial rip there for Wesco, because not only does it give him 5 for the Serra Angel, it makes it less enticing for Reid to spend his next turn just bramble crushing one of his lands, which could have theoretically been quite bad for Craig. But yeah, okay, and we're seeing both of the creatures get in. Craig bluffing just a little bit here, but not a huge amount of upside to Reid to blocking here. On the other end, like, you've got to preserve your life total, and you're certainly not too upset. Well, I guess you are probably a little upset if you trade the Witch Stalker for the Carpathian Knight, so I would suspect him just not to block here.
I guess what it does do, though, is take away the whole turn, because we know that Wesco has no play.
Right.
Reid's going to just take it. And, of course, we do get pump, because we know Wesco has nothing. So Reid Duke will fall to 14.
And we see here, Carpathian Knight, not a bad card by any means. Certainly Craig's playing it, but there's a huge difference between a 2-power creature for 2 mana and a 1-power creature for 2 mana. Craig has had a 2-drop, a 3-drop, and is a pumpable turn 4. No play, but he's done something on turn 4. And yet, Reid's at a reasonably healthy 14 life and had to sacrifice his entire 4th turn in order to get him there.
I can tell you that Ben Stark has defeated Willie Adel by 2-0, and that means that Ben Stark advances. He is from 12 points up to 5-2. Willie Adel now slips, because that was a 12 against 9 match. Willie Adel now at 3-4, and very much looking at needing lots and lots of wins from here. He basically needs to run the tables from here. You see Duke's hand on the right of your screen. That plummet is going to be significant, because Craig Wescoe's Serra Angel is the card he hopes is going to drive him through to victory, essentially, in this deciding game. And we know that there is that plummet ready to go at any time for Reid. So that Serra Angel may not be long for this world.
Yeah, and Reid also playing the Academy Raiders to a great target for Lightning Talons. And he drew an extra land right here that he doesn't need to hold because he's got the mana from the Elvish Mystic. So he spent last turn not really committing a lot of power and toughness to the board, but developing his board in a very
I've got my
reasonable
combo, says Reid. Got my combo. Lightning Talons and a Witch Stalker.
So I was actually thinking he was going to put the Talons on the unblockable creature. Instead, he's putting it on the hexproof creature, so he's not going to get 2 for 1.
Yep.
Obviously, also very good. But the Witch Stalker can get chump blocked in a way that the Raiders cannot. So definitely some upsides and downsides to both plays. But I think Reid just saying, okay, I'm in pretty firm command of the game right here because he knows he can plummet the Angel, and he just doesn't want to get blown out by a removal spell.
Yeah, that Academy Raider triggering there had Intimidate, and whenever it deals combat damage to a player, you may discard a card. And if you do, well, then you get to draw a card. So Reid in terrific shape now, although Wesco may still feel he's in pretty okay shape in the fact that he does have that Serra Angel. There you see Reid deep in thought.
Yeah, I think he's trying to think now. What does he discard? Okay, he's already discarded the mountain to the Raider, drew another land, trying to decide, I think, whether he wants to play that land or whether he wants to worry about plummeting now or maybe try to get a 2-for-1 out of it later.
Yeah, I mean, he has to be potentially concerned because Wesco's deck, we know, is sort of full of assorted tricks. Wesco, not least, has the ability, if Duke casts the plummet on his own turn, then that Serra Angel's sacrifice into Bloodburn is infinitely less relevant.
Right.
So there is just an instinctive upside that a Bloodburn as a 4/4 is an option if the plummet happens at instant speed during Wesco's turn.
The other variable is the Dark Favor that Wesco just drew. Now, obviously, if he enchants Serra Angel, which is an enticing target because he can't be blocked, really opening himself up to plummet. So Wesco thinking right now, what does Reid likely have with 3 mana open because of the Mystic that can go wrong? Mystic very important here too, because if he just plays Dark Favor on one of the smaller creatures, Reid can chump block, which is very important in this racing situation.
Plains and Dark Favor for Wesco, off his mulligan to 5. Reid Duke with the 1 extra card when he mulliganed to 6, and then the extra card from being on the draw.
So I'm wondering what Reid is planning on doing with that Bramble Crush. You know, he left it and he may have boarded it, and we've seen Dark Favor as a target. Oftentimes Black-White can have enchantments, it's got pacifism, it's got Quag Sicknesses, which sometimes kill your creatures, but don't always. And so potentially the Bramble Crush in to blow up those. But my favorite Bramble Crush target is just a land. You just got to get him, you know. Just get him.
Well, that would certainly have worked in game 1 when there was only a single Plains in play.
Exactly.
Dark Favor goes on the Serra Angel.
And that's just the exact ideal situation for Reid.
Yeah. Yep, you've seen on the right of your screen that plummet has been sitting there for a very long time, waiting for just the kind of moment where you get not just 2-for-1, but 2-for-1 with some damage, essentially, because of the clause on Dark Favor.
Yeah, and Dark Favor, you're right. Yeah, exactly. On top of it all, you know, obviously that play was a colossal beating to begin with, and Craig took 1 damage.
Reid draws an Advocate of the Beast. 2/3 with the ability to put +1/+1 counter at the end of turn on a beast you control.
I'm wondering exactly how one advocates for beasts. Is he like a lobbyist? Maybe a member of an NGO? Very rarely does Rich Hagan get rendered speechless. I'm relishing this moment.
Yeah, so are they.
So Reid now, I mean, he's got Witchstalker, which essentially is an abyss. I mean, Craig gets to take 1 hit from it, but Academy Raider with the Intimidate going to drop him to 8 and then 7, meaning that he's going to die in a few turns no matter what, and really needs to produce a steady stream of blockers.
In comes the Academy Raider. Just quickly, Zach, explain what you mean by abyss.
Sorry, the Abyss being an enchantment that kills a creature every turn.
Right.
It's from Legends, but basically the idea is once Craig's life total gets low enough, he's got to start losing a creature to that Witchstalker every turn, or it's just going to straight up end the game.
Yeah, and that drawing of Plains is going to very close to straight up end the game, I feel. Because Wesco really needed to fight back here, and he is really struggling to do so.
So you see actually Reid, knowing that he's in a reasonably good position, not electing to attack with Witchstalker last turn because it would trade with the Capation Knight. Wants to basically say, okay, Craig, like I'll let you sit and hold 6 mana or 4 mana up every single turn of the game while I'm drawing cards and nickel and diming through some damage. So not a bad position for Reid to be in.
Another result comes in. It was 3 games, but Tom Martell moves to 3 and 4 at the expense of David Ochoa, who is now 2 and 5, and that is pretty much the end of David Ochoa for top 4 contention. Also, Stark over Adel 2-0. Shahar 2-1 over Kibler. You already know that, so Shahar Shenhar is up to 6-1. And we believe that Reid Duke here, currently tied at 1-1 here in round 7, M14 Limited, is about to join Shahar Shenhar on 6-1. But let's see. Play it out.
Oh, of course. I mean, the Master of Diversions for Wesco theoretically could open up some gaps. The challenge is Reid's just gumming up the board like crazy, has a consistent source of damage, has a consistent source of card advantage. Craig still has enough mana to pump Capation Knight to allow it to trade with Witch Stalker. You know, normally you're used to your Lightning Talons creatures not being able to be blocked profitably, but sometimes your opponent has creature with first strike too.
So there you see the board state. There's my attack, and Reid will indeed find that that Capation Knight is getting in the way of his huge first striker. Pump all the way.
So 11-6, right?
Yes.
11-6 is the score. And Reid will run out a Colonian Tusker.
And he gets an additional token from Advocate of the Beast.
Because
so
it turns out that Colonian Tusker's a beast.
convenient interaction.
Handy. That was a 4-4 for 2 he just made there.
That is not too bad. And I think Reid's saying, okay, look, like I'm going to have to do something about that knight at some point. I'll go ahead and trade my Witch Stalker away so that my Tusker can get through profitably. And there's only so many good blocks that you can have for a creature for 2 mana. Reid really slow rolling that Bramble Crush. You see him looking at Wesco's deck list. There may be some card that he is incredibly afraid of. He could have theoretically blown up one of Wesco's lands last turn and made him commit to pumping the Knight to make sure that nothing else was going to happen when he attacked. But instead just elected to say, look, I've got Intimidate creatures, I've got 4/4s, this is probably going to be enough for me to win.
I think what's going on there, Zach, and it's something I talked to a bunch of the players yesterday, it's not precisely fear, it's more making absolutely sure, because the tiniest margins are punished at this level.
For sure.
And they're like, hey, I got myself into a position where I'm about to win this round, so let's make sure I win this round.
Right. Yeah.
And we saw that in the booth multiple times yesterday, where there was a lot of conservative playing where I heard you say, I heard Luis say, I heard Marshall say, you're like, he's won. He just turns his guy sideways or just attacks with this and it's over. And every time you saw the people in the feature match area just going, right, hang on. And we saw Reid pick up deck list there and just go, right, is there anything there that can hurt me? And no.
I mean, it really does change the way the game is played when you have access to your opponent's deck list. You don't have to suppose things. You don't have to play a Wrath if they don't, play around something that could destroy all your creatures if you know they don't have it. So it really does become possible to just process every single combination of cards that your opponent could deploy against it.
Sure.
You go to 5.
So Wesco is at 5, but as you can see on your screen, there are precisely 0 creatures on the right-hand side of the table, and quite a lot for Reid Duke. And now here comes Scavenging Ooze, one of the premium cards in M14, and there's a swamp. And there you go, handshake from Wesco, and that was the last match of round 7, and Reid Duke takes it.
He has the Plummet. I don't think I can win because you have a big board there. So I'm going to have to play the Dark Favor on my guy either this turn or next turn to try to win. So
Welcome back to the booth. Craig Wescoe and Reid Duke getting into earnest conversation. One of the features, Zach, of this tournament, when you get on with your opponent really well and you've had a good game, you will often sit and chat a bit about the match. But it's often, happens most often when it's a meeting of equals.
Right.
And so if you feel that your opponent's much better than you, you feel a bit embarrassed saying, I thought I'd do this, because you think, I'm just explaining to them why I'm an idiot. And if you think you're much better than your opponent, you're like, well, he might come back and beat me next time if I explain what I was thinking. But at this level, everyone is talking with each other pretty much every round about, okay, my draft went like this, and I was really interested in seeing that you'd taken that, and like in game 1, I was surprised you did this, and explain it to me. And even we saw yesterday, we saw Ben Stark and Craig Wescoe sit down and play some more Magic after the match had finished, because they decided it wasn't a sufficiently fair test of the two decks that were really interesting and a really good matchup. And then they just sat there and went, yep, let's play some more Magic. And that's what they did. I can tell you that we're going to head down to the floor in a little bit just to talk to Reid Duke, find out what's going on with him. He is one of the 2 co-leaders at 6-1. And remember, there are 12 rounds total. 7 have gone, 5 still to come, 2 more of M14 draft. And then we settle into Modern down the stretch. And that's where the top 4 will be coming back on Sunday after, Zach, the small matter of 71 nations competing in the World Magic Cup.
Yeah, and I'm really incredibly excited for this second annual World Magic Cup. Last year, it was an event of unprecedented scale. It was totally incredible to watch. 71 countries, I believe it is.
Yep.
It's unbelievable to see that many people coming from all around the world to be in one place to play Magic. And the other thing that was incredibly exciting was, you learned about players that you'd never met before or hadn't seen in a really long time. And there were all these powerhouse teams. Are sort of the favorites coming in, but then nothing's written in stone. And what we saw were some of those teams falling by the wayside.
The Belgians last year,
yeah,
an
exactly.
incredible team, basically 4 genuine pros. This time, 2 of them are back, Vincent Lemoine and Moraine Liebert. They're coming back, trying to do the Reid Duke redemption, if you like. Let's get down and find out what Reid Duke has to say first thing this morning. Let's get down to Sheldon Menery.
Hey, Sheldon Menery down here in the feature match area with Reid Duke. That was putting you at 6-1. That's something setting you up for the rest of the day.
Yeah, pretty big to do well in the draft. I didn't want to leave things hanging in the hands of my Modern deck, and I didn't want to leave things hanging in the hands of tiebreakers. And while certainly it's possible that could still happen, winning the first round of the day just really is what I wanted to do, to put it simply.
So it looked like you took at the beginning of the end game there a kind of conservative line. Instead of sort of going all in, you held back a little bit.
Yeah, Craig, his deck was very dangerous. He had a Johnny, Caller of the Pride, which the ability to give his Blood Baron flying and double strike can really steal a game out of nowhere. So I wanted to do everything I could to play around that top deck, which was the reason you saw me make that awful trade with the Capatian Knight. The turn I did was just to make sure he didn't have enough creatures to make it a 6/6 double strike, which would have been lethal. I also held the Bramble Crush in my hand for the same reason. He had a Johnny in addition to cards like Mark of the Vampire. So rather than try to discard it every turn to the Rector or to the Academy Raider looking for a burn spell, I figured just keep the Bramble Crush in my hand, and it really reduces the number of ways the game can go wrong for me.
Did you think at any time to take out one of his 2 swamps with the Bramble Crush?
I thought of it, but given that we were both playing off the top, I felt it was better to save the Bramble Crush to kill a potential top deck rather than delay his casting of a potential top deck. Just basically the very, very conservative, way of playing.
All right, know you got another round to get to, so good luck the rest of the day.
Thanks very much.
All right, I'm Sheldon Menery. We're down in the feature match area. Now back to the booth.
Yeah, that was pretty embarrassing, actually. I thought in that 2 minutes you found out about 15 reasons why Reid Duke's better than we're ever going to be. That was, just once you get inside the mind of someone like that and you just think, see, I don't think about things like that when I play. I don't play around that. I didn't even know that was a card. And you're just like, yep. Fine. Magic. Game of skill. Who knew? Reid Duke is done. He's 6-1. We're done for round 7. We'll be back with round 8. But first, let's head over to the news desk and Marshall Sutcliffe.
Hey everybody, welcome back to the news desk. Marshall Sutcliffe here, and I've got a special guest from Magic R&D, Tom Lapilli. Tom, welcome to the news desk.
Thank you.
We're really happy to have you here in Amsterdam. We get to have a nice little chat with Tom here. You represent the R&D, the pit, right? The area of Wizards that actually produces the Magic cards. And you have a perspective that all of the players don't, right? I mean, most of us out here that play Magic, that love Magic, don't get to see it from behind the curtain. And you're kind of pushing and pulling levers from behind the curtain.
Yeah, it's our job to kind of build the playground that all these guys get to play on. And So it's interesting to see. It's like, oh, maybe we should have made that swing set a little bit higher or whatever, but this is where it all comes together.
Yeah, because
so.
I think the thing that it's hard to remember, I don't know if it's hard to remember, but for me, it's like, when I see a Magic card, it is etched in stone. Like, it is just has always been that. That's exactly what it is. There's no other option. But for you, it's like, well, we bumped the toughness, we changed the casting cost, we added this little thing, and we could have, it's like a whole bunch of knobs that you can turn. But for us, it's like, it's just a card. It is what it is.
That's often the hardest thing for people who are new to the department to get used to, is the fact that, like, this card is so annoying. It's like, okay, well, how should it be different? And they're like, oh, right.
I forgot.
Like,
I have a Sharpie, and I can do that.
Yeah, you sure do. So.
All right. Now, we've been talking a lot about M14 Limited. We're watching the draft portion right now of the World Championship, but we're going to take a little bit different of a look at it here. We're going to talk about it from more of a constructed standpoint for you.
Sounds good.
So one of the points that we have is talking about how you take a core set and have a little bit of overlap with last year's cards.
Sure. So my favorite example of this historically is Steel Overseer, which was a way for us to lead into Scars of Mirrodin block. We wanted some kind of artifact beatdown deck to be a thing as soon as Scars came out. However, if we put all of the cards that it takes to make that happen into Scars, we have what we call a block monster usually, which is where in one block of cards, you have so many powerful things for one deck that you're just stuck with it for a long time, and it makes things kind of stagnant.
So you've kind of committed to this grouping of cards for a long period of time, and if you don't end up happy with where that settles, pretty unhappy.
Right. So when you do something like a Steel Overseer, you get to sort of lead into next year's stuff. You also get to do things like play with cards from 2 years ago.
Yeah.
So something like Zathrid Necromancer, you see works with the black-white human deck that is seeded with Innistrad and Dark Ascension.
Right. Now, and it works really well in that deck.
It does work really well. We saw a Star City Open that was won by AJ Soccer playing that deck, basically, which we understood exactly what deck we were making that card for.
Right.
But if we put that card in Magic 2013 instead of Magic 2014, we're stuck with another block monster.
Right.
We've got something like, here's the humans in Innistrad. Right away, here's another really strong human constructed card. And then you're stuck with that. So if we put something in Magic 2014 that's only overlapping for 3 months, we get to see a pop of power in cards that are about to go away. And it causes more diversity, more change, which we find that people who play a lot of Standard, that's what they're looking for these days. Is Standard is so explored with all the open series tournaments that happen that when we can add some extra bumps in what's going on, it's usually better.
Yeah, and that's interesting how there's kind of a risk-reward thing happening. You're assessing the risk of saying, well, let's make this group of cards in the block significantly better.
Right.
But if we overdo it, it's 3 months, people will adjust enough, and we're not stuck with it for a whole year.
Yeah, 3 months of something like that is really not a terrible fate in the grand scheme of things. So we can afford to be a little bit riskier.
Okay, now one thing, for anybody that plays Standard, now I play a lot of Standard, and the Standard deck that I play, the over-under on how many basic lands it plays is 1, and it's a push. I play 1 basic land in the whole deck, and even then I kind of go, do I really need that 1 planes in the deck?
Right.
How do you guys, I mean, that has to pop up on your radar that everybody's playing dual lands.
Yeah, so going into the end of Ravnica, we know that this is crazy multicolor world. Everyone's playing tons of non-basics. They're playing a lot of colors, and we haven't given them any reason to not play a ton of colors. So if we push further in that direction in Magic 2014, we get another sort of block monstery effect where there's no reason to play less than 3 colors.
Right.
So we were looking for ways to incentivize some of this stuff. So we attacked it from both directions in this set. You saw yesterday, at the end of the day, Burning Earth completely demolish Reid Duke's chances.
Yeah, we have a slide
back.
of Burning Earth we can bring up for everybody too. Yeah, go ahead.
So yeah, that card was definitely something that said, all those non-basic lands that you're used to playing with, you might need to think about this.
Yes.
On the other end, we wanted to give people some reason to only play 2 colors. So that's why Mutavolt's in this set. We know Mutavolt's an extremely powerful card. It's good with humans from last year, it's good with slivers in the set, but it's not mostly about that. It is mostly about giving people a strong, colorless land that can pull you away from your third color.
I see. That's really interesting to me because that has certainly occurred to me as I've played. Everybody's just playing everything. You really do have free reign as far as up to 3 colors to kind of do whatever you want.
And Mutavault certainly has not played out that way in Standard yet, but I expect that in Unified Team Constructed, I was talking to some players on various World Magic Cup national teams, and what they all were saying was that all of them had what they called their Mutavault deck.
Okay.
Because they have 2 crazy multicolor decks, and then they could do another one, but there are enough rewards for something like Mutavault or playing something like Mono Red maybe, where there are cards that say, no, you should actually be a little more disciplined with one of my decks.
Okay, now I know one of the things about working in R&D is that you guys crave opinions from the outside world. Now, you're also furnished with no shortage of them via social media, via emails and that kind of stuff, but I love it when I see the R&D guys out here on the Pro Tour because they're always talking to people. What do you like about this? What did you think about this? Just getting that feedback. What is it like for you when you make decisions like Burning Earth, like Mutavault, and then you actually see it come to fruition like out here on the pro stage?
It's really fun when it works. It's also a little bit disappointing sometimes when it doesn't work, but I think of us, I guess the closest metaphor that I think of how things go is it's like bowling. You don't really know where the format's going to go when you throw it down the lane, but one of the things that we try to do is build bumpers as we go down. So that's why often you see something like Deathmark or Celestial Purge. It's like, maybe green creatures are awesome, but like, if the format starts to head toward a gutter of like green and white creatures are too good, the format can bounce off of a Deathmark. Or like, something like Negate is often great. If there's some spell-based combo deck, it's like, well, Negate is here to keep us coming down the lane into a spot that we like. So many of those cards that never see the light of day, we're still very glad we made, because 10% of the time they save the world.
Yes,
so.
and a card like Burning Earth, more specific, right? It's a little bit more lasered in at a certain problem or a certain thing that you would like to mix up. It doesn't have to be a problem, right? Like, it could also just be an adjustment.
Yeah, and that's fine too. Like,
because people do like playing 3 colors.
Oh, sure. And Reid Duke could have had a way to kill an enchantment in a sideboard. I don't believe that he did, but he could have. That was on him to decide whether or not he wanted to worry about that.
All right, now this next one, I'm really interested in this because once I saw these, I kind of had a light bulb moment. You know, I like to put on my game designer hat every once in a while. I don't wear it for very long because I start feeling dumb after a while. But the color hate cards, you know, we call these, normally I think in older sets we would have had cards that just had protection from a color or a subset of colors. What did you guys do in M14 to kind of tweak that?
So I guess the first thing is why those even exist at all. I talked about the block monster effect. When you make cards that hate on colors coming at the end of a multicolor set, that's another way to kind of make you say, wow, maybe I shouldn't play so many colors because then these color hate guys are going to come in and get me. But we've had things like Paladin and Vec in the past. And I don't know if anybody else out there ever tried to play a red-black deck against a Paladin and Vec in like 2006 Standard, but that's not very fun because there's just nothing you can do.
Right.
Certainly you can try to burn all the rest of their guys and then hit run to make them sack it and take 3, but like that never works and then you die. So with these guys, we made the cards to be good against what we think those 2 colors mostly do. So like, if I want to play a Merfolk deck in Modern or whatever, the thing that I'm most afraid of other than spot removal cards is like Tarmogoyf, because it's just this giant guy that sits down in front of my stuff, and it's hard to get bigger than that. So Tidebinder Mage says, okay, well I lock that down. Certainly you can get your guy bolted, but like if they don't kill your Tidebinder Mage, you've turned off a Tarmogoyf or something. So that's pretty good against that. When Lifebane Zombie in particular, which we saw a lot of yesterday, that was made because we had so many green creatures in particular that have enters the battlefield abilities. A little bit of a reaction to Thragtusk, but then when we saw like Huntmaster of the Fells is kind of doing something similar, it's like, okay, this is maybe what we need to do here.
And Lifebane Zombie, we've seen a lot out here already. It's made a big splash in Standard.
That's one of those things, like, speaking as a game designer, I look at that now, it's like, I wonder if that would have been good enough as a 2/2, or, you know, what can I take away from this card and still have it be good enough to do that job? I don't know. I think maybe we overshot a little bit, given that they were main decking 16 of them across 16 decks. But hey, it's doing what we meant it to do, just maybe a little better than it needed to do it, and that's okay. We are often going to overshoot in the name of trying to get to the right spot, because sometimes a card is going to miss low, sometimes a card is going to miss high. We have to aim at the middle, and maybe we missed a little here. Maybe we didn't in the long run. Maybe it's getting overplayed in this field because it's a small field.
Yeah.
And there's something strange going on. I don't know, but I know I feel a little better if like there are 7 cards in this set that make you say, hey, maybe I shouldn't play all 3 colors, like it's not a big deal.
Right. Now, so what was the main impetus from changing from the old way to the new? I mean, you
Sure.
still made these cards hard to deal with. They still have potent effects against the decks that they want to, but
Right.
they just weren't a blanket thing where you're just like, look, you just can't touch this ever.
Yeah, we found with protection, some of these guys actually had protection abilities for a little while. And what we discovered is, even though we kind of want to step on the multicolor cards, it was almost too punishing to have protection when everyone was playing a ton of gold cards.
Yeah.
Because what we want to happen is that you play your gold cards against these guys, and then you say, wow, these cards were better against me because I played with all these gold cards. So maybe I should think about doing something else.
Okay.
As opposed to you thinking, oh my God, I hate Magic, this is ridiculous.
Yeah.
Which is kind of what we were thinking to ourselves when we put ourselves in that position in playtesting.
Okay.
So something like Tidebinder Mage, you're like, man, you got my red-green guy, but it's not like it's dead forever and I can never do anything. And
Yeah. And same thing with Fiendslayer Paladin. You know, it is good against the spot removal. I mean, it cannot be spot removed from the colors that you want it to be, but it still enters combat, right?
Right.
It still can be blocked. It still
you
can
can
be
beat
attacked.
it with a 3/3. You
Yes.
certainly can't beat it with a 2/2. But,
Right.
but yeah.
And I think that that's really awesome. Can we look to the future to seeing this type of thing come up more often, or is this specific because we just came off of Return to Ravnica block?
We've definitely been more judicious with protection lately than we have been in the past because of how punishing it can be against gold cards. I think until Ravnica rotates out, you can expect us to be a little bit more careful about it.
Okay. Yeah, so because that's one of the things that I'm looking at as I kind of like where these have landed.
Yeah.
Now, sure, I mean, we do have some pretty high power level stuff here. And like you said, that's the kind of thing that you need to tweak after the fact. But I like the philosophy change. I think that's the thing that a lot of players have noticed is that, I mean, when I first saw them, I just assumed, oh, it's got pro something, you know, and oh no, that actually isn't at all what it has. And that changes how it plays out significantly.
It does. One of the things that I've heard from designers is that just the words protection from black, they're fantastic words to write on a card. It's flavorful. You don't exactly understand what it means, but you think it's like, oh, well, this is going to be good against stuff that's that color. But we don't have to spend those words on the cards that we need to fix high-level tournament Magic.
Right.
You know, we can put the more complex but more laser-targeted words on cards that we need to fix standard. And we can put something like White Knight or Black Knight in, and it's like, that probably won't see a ton of high-level constructed play, but it'll make some people happy.
Yes.
But we don't have to do that for Fiendslayer Paladin. So Paladin and Vec was very briefly in the set, if I remember correctly.
Oh, is that right?
And that lasted about 2 or 3 days before we were just like, wow, our standards have gone up.
Yes.
We're going to change this card.
I like that. Now,
So-
when it comes to cards like Lifebane Zombie, when you guys set out to design this card slot, you know, you have something in mind for that. Do you consider things like, we'd like this to be a main deck card, or this is supposed to be a sideboard card, or do you kind of let the players decide that?
I think our goal for these, if I remember correctly, was that you would sometimes want to main deck them if the field was very heavily multicolored, or if one color was particularly giving your deck trouble.
Okay.
And the rest of the time they would be sideboard cards.
Okay,
was
so kind of in the middle.
What we were aiming for. Certainly having a bunch of Thragtusks and Restoration Angels and Huntmasters of the Fells running around, if that's the sometimes that you want for main deck Lifebane Zombies, I can accept that.
Yeah, that seems fun.
Those cards are all pretty good.
Yeah, and you know, we've seen that here out of the standard decks. Like you said, there was a bunch of them already put into the main decks of these cards. Now, it is a little hard to tell because when you have the 16-player field, there's a whole lot of metagaming. There's a whole lot of what do I expect to see, and a little bit less so when you're going to enter like a big field standard tournament at home.
Right. I know Craig Wescoe had 4 of the Fiendslayer Paladins in his main deck, and I was a little bit confused when I saw that at first, but then I looked at the quantity of blue, white, red, and Jund decks that there are, and that's pretty good there.
Yeah.
Like, you can't get putrefied, you can't get searing speared, you can't get pillar flamed. It's like, okay, I see what you're up to. And once again, if that's the sometimes, then great. Because my impression of the field here is that nobody really thought maybe I should investigate not being 3 colors as much as I would have been before. And I think that the record of the Burning Earth decks, which is the other 3 decks in the tournament, being 6 and 3, that's a small sample size, but that's a pretty good record. And Kibler went 3-0 in particular with, I think, the most impressive of the decks. I
really liked his deck.
Yeah, Zach Hill, in fact, in the Future League, had a deck that was extremely similar to Kibler's deck.
Is that right?
Kibler's details, I think, were better, but he's tuning with a different eye than we're tuning to. We're not trying to crush all of our coworkers into the ground with a perfectly tuned sideboard. We're trying to make sure that everything is working. But yeah, it was a very similar deck.
Now, you just talked about the Future League. Can you tell the people at home what that is really quickly, just for the ones that haven't heard the term?
Sure. The Future League is our version of standard playtesting. We are usually about a year in the future. Sometimes we do goofy formats if we're investigating specific questions, like sometimes we play block constructed because we want to find out, wow, are we missing a 2 mana, 3 damage burn spell in this format or something that we wouldn't have otherwise found if we didn't look at it that way. But most of the time we play standard. And I think the reason that standard has been so good lately is that we've gotten a lot better at doing that. We play more, we have more people working on it, we have pulled in people from other departments occasionally that we can playtest with and say, like, are you enjoying these decks? And sometimes they'll say yes, and sometimes they'll be like, this card sucks, change it. And we'll be like, okay. But yeah, it's pretty good. We had a Future League before, which was not far enough in the future to be useful.
Is that why it's called the Future League?
That's why it's the Future League. It's totally embarrassing, but yeah, the Future League was not futuristic enough, so we added more futurism, and now we are futuristic enough. I don't know.
Yeah, I think you are.
Yes.
For what it's worth. Now, when you're in the Future League, are you're working, right?
Yes.
I mean, you're playing Magic, but you're also gleaning information, trying to work towards a goal, trying to get things taken care of, kind of checkbox off stuff. How much room do you have to design like a Tom Lapilli deck? Maybe the kind that you personally like versus, well, we need to design this, this, and this.
Sure. Sometimes you're trying to be clever. Other times you're just trying to fill in a gap in what's going on. But often the approach is much like an essay, like the comes from a French word that means to try. Like many essays originally are just like, I'm going to begin writing about a question and see what happens, and then I'll learn something. Deck building inside Wizards for playtesting is very similar. It's like, I'll come in with a question like, I wonder what this looks like, or I wonder if this card is stupid, or I wonder if I can do this with this card. And so you end up in a place, and generally you stop once you've answered the question. And sometimes you just like end up building the deck and you're like, I am missing this kind of card.
I see.
Then I need to go yell at someone to get this something to fill this hole made.
I see.
Sometimes you're like, wow, I got to the end, I built this list, I have no idea, I'm going to go play a bunch of games. And then you can answer your question and stop. And certainly like the proudest decks that I've built in the Future League, I'll never be able to show anyone because those are the ones that quickly and efficiently get a card changed.
Oh yeah, right.
Like, there was a previous version of the card Sages of Lost Alara from Alara Reborn.
Yeah, I remember that.
That I completely broke. And no one will ever see what it was.
And it's gone. Yep.
But I'm really proud of it.
Yeah, of
It
course.
was totally sweet. I think that deck was actually a significant contributor to me being hired full time.
Oh, very good.
But that's all it'll ever do.
Yeah,
And
all
that's okay.
Now, we've been talking about M14. You were talking about how some of the cards look to the previous block and kind of take some notes from that. Is it safe to assume that some of the cards also look to the future?
Yes, although I'm not sure.
So why don't you tell me about which cards those are?
No.
No. Okay. So we got summarily shut down here, but there are some in there. You're going to have to figure out what they are for yourself, though. All right, we're ready to go back down to more feature match coverage here from the World Championship in Amsterdam. Tom Lapilli, thanks for joining us. We'll see you guys in a little bit.